they can do it. So great to see everyone here. We are in our third week of the journey. And as I've sort of shared with most of you guys, this first sort of few weeks together it's a lot about kind of preparing to be able to run after something like this. And, people sometimes will have this like, oh, shouldn't I be writing? Do I need to be doing these things? Like, am I in the right place? The reality of it is like, this is a long-term game. And so the more you're focusing on the tools and the mindset and all the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, the more likely you are to succeed. So I know some of you are getting antsy to write. We're going to talk about our first writing assignment tonight. So you'll get your very first writing assignment tonight. But I think the most important thing is that, whenever you tackle something that's of this heft and of this magnitude, it really is important to kind of prepare in these sorts of ways. So let me drive a couple slides, and then I'm going to bring in Shonda to talk a little bit about the editing side of things a bit, so you can talk about that. But as I shared, we're here in kind of our this get smart phase a little bit, which is a lot of the things we're doing early on to really make sure you have the right foundation to build this book, because it is a long journey. I mean, this is like close to a year-long journey, and a lot of the stuff that we do now sets you up for those sorts of things. And tonight's a really, really interesting one. We're going to talk a lot about the author mindset that I think has been one of the most substantive things we've done to really help authors get through writer's block, get through distractions, and really succeed. So I'm going to have Shonda Lane talk a little bit about editors in just a quick second here. And then we're going to dive into the big stuff tonight about traction, distraction. We're going to talk about your author plan to kind of prepare you for working with your editor and sort of help communicate with them. And then the last part of this one is we're going to have our author circle, where we're really going to talk about how to start to kind of build packs as a tool to get you where you're going a little bit. So that's the big stuff tonight. So I want to hand the reins over here to Shonda Lane for not only to rest my voice a little bit, but to have her share. So I'll brag on Shonda Lane a little bit here. So about 2 years ago or so, when I shared with Shonda Lane that I was sort of expanding this beyond Georgetown, I said, she'd been working with a couple groups of authors of mine. I said, hey, can you help me find like more people like you? And she's like, I mean, okay. And she has done an incredible job of finding amazing people who love this aspect of teaching and coaching and working in this program, and has really been, I mean, honestly, I think give her a lot of credit for finding the amazing people you're going to meet. But she's been working as a development editor for years in her career. She's written books and edited many books. She's worked with probably over 100 authors through this program specifically. But I thought it would be good for her to sort of share a little bit about what it's like to work with editors, how to think about it. And I think the biggest thing that I think she will share with you a little bit is like, these are people who are on your team, and like use them as a resource, because the more you do, the more you will certainly succeed. So Shonda, why don't you, give a little song and dance here, and then people can ask any questions that you want as you go too.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And like Eric, I'm sorry you're getting both of us at our less than healthiest. So if you see me mute, don't take it personally. It's just so you don't have to listen to me cough. But we're here. I'm the head of developmental editing, like Eric said, and this is a really exciting time. It's where you're all kind of coming in and you're starting to create story space, and you're getting ready to meet your developmental editor. And a lot of you haven't worked with any kind of editor, much less a developmental editor, in this specific before. And so what we do is a little different than what you're probably thinking of with an editor. You're probably thinking someone who's going to go in and mess with your spellings and move your commas and periods around and do all these things that you might not be ready for when you're just trying to get ideas on the page or on your screen. And so what we actually do is that's what we help you with. We don't mess with your grammar and your punctuation and your spelling. We don't do any of those things. We're here to be your sounding board, to be your coach. If we need to be your therapist. We are your accountability partners. We're here to help you with structure and ideas, interview questions, interview briefs, story nuggets, all the way through to getting your first chapter structured and even the overall structure of your book. That's what we do as developmental editors. So we're really here to really hold your hand and be with you every step of the way as you write this book. And what's really exciting and very personal about that for each one of you and each one of our editors is that as closely as I try to pair you with someone who has the similar interests, has similar tastes, has a specialty editing in the subject matter you'll be covering, these are also people that you're going to be able to talk to just like this, face to face, 1 to 2 times a week if you need to, more if you need to. You'll be able to personally message them. You'll be able to do a PM on Quip. You have a chat room with them. You have as much time as you need with them for them to be the coach that you need to get through your book. And the key to that is actually using them. You have to talk to us. We will send you messages every week. We will pester you, but we can't really effectively help you if you don't tell us what you need. Tell us how best to help you. How much accountability do you need? How do you like to work? Does it work well for you to pair with an author who is also a DE and they're writing a book and you're their accountability partner as well? Does it work better for you to have someone that talks to you a lot? Does it work better for you to have someone that checks in for 15 minutes each week and then leaves you alone? You have to be able to share that information with us, because we can't best help you if you don't tell us how and you don't work with us to help you through it. If you have questions, doubts, fears, anything at all that comes up, your DE is your go-to person to talk to. And that's what they're there for, is to help you as much as possible, make this as fun as possible, and as interesting as possible for you. So do any of you have any questions for me about what it is we do as DEs, or just things that you're curious about that your DE might be able to help you with?
And I'll pile on just one thing before any questions here, I guess. Or you can feel free to post them in the chat room or whatever it is. But I think the biggest thing I will tell you is that if you find yourself feeling lost or like unclear on something, the best thing you can really do is say, hey, can we get on a quick call? And that sort of like simple conversation is really powerful. It is one of those things that like writing a book is a very lonely process, and we oftentimes think in that way. So the more you're able to sort of say, hey, I just want to run something by you or check something with you, or I'd love you to read this thing, that simple act of it makes it so that you're not, a lot of people will think about, I need a co-author. And the editor really plays that similar role for you, having someone that's sort of on your team in that regard. So do use them in that sort of way. Any burning quick questions at all?
So when we have our editor, can we just call them and say, hey, I just like to work out this idea I have in my head, and just to say, so just stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And every week in the weekly message that you'll receive from your editor, they will include a link to their calendar, and you'll be able to go out to their e-calendar and book a call at any time that they're available. So they'll tell you up front, here are the hours I'm available this week. Here's where you can book your calls. You can go out there and book that call anytime.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Well, and again, Shonda is in your all of your update rooms, and I'll talk a little bit more about the update rooms, how we use them. But that's kind of what you're going to see is it takes a village really to build your book. And so Shonda and myself and Lynn and your editor and eventually your cover designers and stuff like that will be in this updates room. So it is like one big gigantic happy family that we have. But feel free to message Shonda. One of the things too is like if you're just not vibing with your editor, I don't think we've had that. I don't know if we had that at all. Maybe one person has had that happen in the last session, but if you just don't feel like you're a fit, just let her know. It's very, very rare that that does happen. But Shonda has been really great at trying to match people based on interest, background, and sort of style. Sometimes calendars just don't line up in that way. But, definitely Shonda is super approachable. And again, I would give her big props for being able to help us pull together an amazing group of humans that are here to help you. And so, Shonda, thank you again. And get out of here and rest that voice of yours.
Thank you. You guys have a great night.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah, and I think, again, just to sort of reiterate that one, I think you're going to be working with an editor, and that is one of the reasons why the success rate is so high in this program is just the fact that having an editor in that way really, really helps you. If you ever find yourself feeling a little bit lost, feeling like you're sort of out of something, not sure, want to change your topics, honestly, just get on the phone. And they always have their calendar for that week, so just do it. And there's no limit, right? Like we don't like say, oh gosh, like Deb, you've already used up your call this week. Like they don't work that way. They're here to help you and figure out what your style is in that regard. So they're awesome. This is probably the secret of this whole program, why the whole thing works. All right, let me dive into a couple other things for tonight then, just so we have the big stuff tonight. So I want to spend tonight talking a lot about this idea of traction and distraction. And I have to be honest with you guys, I think this was something that we started doing last session for the very first time. I realized that I went out and interviewed a bunch of authors who found themselves kind of like ghosting, who got off track and didn't do it. And I started to ask them a lot about what was going on. And I realized that for a number of authors that get themselves lost, the typical response they would always tell me is just how busy they were. And I was like, are you really busy or what's going on? And I realized that there really is something to having the right mindset to succeed in this one. And so I thought I would share in this session, and this is something new that we did last semester, last kind of cohort that I did, and how powerful it was. And so I'm going to talk a lot tonight about this power of the right author mindset and what I learned. I'm going to share a story with you guys. It's a very personal story. Like I've been struggling with the book last fall, and Some of the things I'm going to share with you are about how I got through writer's block, how I was able to succeed through it. And it is by using some of these techniques, but they're super powerful. And I will tell you, it's not obvious to most people, which is why it really is important. So traction and distraction, right? We know what distraction is, but really the opposite of distraction is traction. Distraction takes us away from our goal. Traction takes us to it. And as you know, we're doing something hard, right? Like 2% of people that start books ever finish. And so I really wanted to understand how to help people succeed. And so I spent a bunch of time over the last year with two guys who are kind of the masters at it. Nira Yal and Cal Newport are both two really good friends of mine who've authored some of the world's best books on this idea of our attention, distraction, and traction. And that's one of the big reasons why about 90% of authors that go through this program succeed. It's because we've tried to figure out how to really help people do it. And there's a secret to it. It really is one of those things that, like, when people say things like, I'm just too busy, typically it's not really the whole answer to it. And that's what's important. So tonight I'm going to talk to you a lot about this idea of how you can become an indistractable author. Over the next 20 weeks, there's lots of things that are going to try and distract you from accomplishing your goal. When you and I first had your topic call, you set a goal and said, I want to finish a first draft by the end of June. That's your goal. Now, here's the thing, is that there's going to be lots of things distracting you. There's going to be things you could do. There's going to be work. There's going to be friends. There's going to be home, all these things. I'm going to teach you how to become indistractable, meaning you're not going to let distraction take you away, but you're going to use traction to take you to it. Here's the important thing to understand, is that any of the actions that take us away from what we really want are called distraction. And that's what's important to know, is that you have all made a commitment to me and to the rest of everyone here saying, my goal is to finish a first draft by the end of June. That's what you really want. So that's one side of it. On the other side of it is what we call traction, things that take us towards that goal. So the actions like sitting down to write, having calls to your editor, all those things are those actions. And so the key thing that we're talking about is how can we make sure we do the right actions that lead us towards our goal and not take us away from it. And that's the important thing to understand. Now, the key thing to know is that one of the biggest challenges we have is distraction, and they're all around. It's challenging to sort of overcome distraction, but what's interesting is that oftentimes what we sort of think about things are really what the challenge is. So I'm going to tell you a very personal story here, a little bit about my own experience and kind of what can go wrong. And so to be upfront with you guys, I have been working on a book, and last summer, I sort of made the commitment that I was going to finish my manuscript. I've been working on it off and on, but basically at the beginning of the summer, I kind of was working less. I didn't work with a couple consulting clients. I wasn't teaching. And I said, this summer, I'm going to finish working on this manuscript and get a first draft done. And here's what happened. That was my kind of commitment in May. And then around that same time, this little kid showed up. This is Avon, my youngest daughter. So she came in in May. And so I kind of had this idea that, like, it was gonna be great. I was gonna have this I was gonna have extra time. I'd kind of taken off some time, and she was gonna help me finish this draft of the manuscript. Now, here's the problem. As I spent time over the summer, I wasn't making much progress. I had time on the calendar. I was doing all the things, but I literally kept saying things to people like, I'm just too busy. And, justifiably so, right? Like, I'm a busy guy. I'm teaching you guys. I have a kid. Like, I'm busy, right? That's what I would tell the people all the time. And all of you are going to have the same thing. When you find yourself getting distracted or not making progress, like, well, yeah, of course, I'm busy. I've got school. I've got work. I'm just too busy. That's the common thing that people say. Now, for a long time, I would let authors say that and get away with it. Say, yeah, I'm just too busy. But the reality was I realized that I was saying, and it really wasn't what was going on. Here's the important thing to understand, right? When you're too busy, what's really going on here is that you're basically letting actions take you away from what you want to do. This being too busy is really about doing the actions that take you away. And so it wasn't that I was too busy per se. I was really just too distracted. And that's the important thing to know here. We're all busy. We all have things going on. But the reality is, no matter how busy you are you distracted doing actions that take you away from that goal, or are you giving traction to get you towards it? And that's the important thing to understand. Most of us, when we think of these distractions, we think of all these things that we call external triggers, things that are outside of us that are distracting us. These are the things like, Hulu, watching Netflix, binge watching shows, being busy with friends, having a baby, all the kids. Those are all the things that we talk about. And so for me, when I looked at my life, this is what I blamed. These were my external triggers. And what I looked at is my 3 daughters were the things that I would blame. I called all of these things that. And this one up in the corner here, that's my phone. So these were some of the triggers that I was blaming on the fact that I was busy. I said, well, listen, I'm too busy because I'm spending time with kids. I've got all this other stuff going on. And so the reality was I was letting myself be distracted. And so that's the interesting thing, that throughout the course of the summer, I committed to do this book, that I was going to finish this manuscript. And yet I just kept letting myself tell myself, hey, I'm just seriously too busy. Now, here's something that happened. So I have been friends with this guy named Nir Eyal for a while. He's a friend of mine, and he this fall had a new book come out in about September. And I, had reached out to him, and I was like, "Hey, I should get you on my podcast. I'll do an interview with you, talk about your new book, see if I can share it in this way." So he had just put out a new book this fall. It's done great. It's kind of a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and the book is called Indistractable. The idea behind it is that what he's been looking into is, in a world where we've all got phones and all this other stuff, how do you control your attention to get stuff done? How do you wind up doing those things? And so when I was going to sit down with Nir, I was going to talk to him about this idea behind it, but mostly I was just going to kind of like share this conversation to promote his book. Unfortunately for me, it got really real during the conversation. I realized like I was interviewing for me, not for anyone else. And so when we were talking, we started talking a lot about external triggers. And Nir was sharing this sort of stuff, is that, listen, today we have all these devices, we have phones, we have computers, we have notifications, all these sorts of internal triggers. And what all of us tell ourselves is that those are the things that are distracting us. My phone is buzzing, all these sorts of things. I'm always on call, I'm too busy. And what was really interesting is that Nir describes these external triggers as stuff we all have. Expectations at work, kids, phone, social media, all of us have lots and lots of external triggers. But what's interesting is when they studied the neuroscience of things, these are the things that we always blame. This idea of my external triggers, right? My kids, my work, my phone, all that sort of stuff were these things that I blamed for it. But here's where it got really interesting for Nir. What he shared with me is this idea of that when we tell ourselves really busy, we're actually mistaking the problem that's external rather than being internal. What he shared is that the real source of the distraction, letting ourselves be distracted, is internal. It's usually not the phone. What the phone really is we are seeking to be distracted by something else that's going on inside. And when he said that, it was kind of like a gut punch. I was like, holy cow, like, so it's not these other things, it's these stuff. And what he shared is the internal triggers, the stuff that we're afraid of, that we're nervous about, that we're concerned about, is what leads us to seek distraction, these other things. We seek distraction in our phone, we seek distraction in our kids and our work because of other stuff going on. This is what he said, and he said this in the call, and I literally, like, my jaw hit the floor. What is prompting you to compulsively look at your phone or read one more email? What is prompting you to do it? And what he shared is it's not those things. Those are the sort of the distractions that we have. The reality is it's something internal. And what he shared is it's the internal triggers that really drive us to seek distraction. And that was the aha for me. I realized that it wasn't all this other stuff. It was that something was going on inside me that was allowing me to seek distraction. And what he shared with me was there's these 5 big things that we all have, that we have as these internal triggers that lead us to seek distraction. Number 1 is bored. We're not excited about what we're doing. And so we seek distraction because we're not excited about what we're doing. We're lonely. We don't like working on something alone. So this loneliness aspect of it. Insecurity. And this is a big one. Imposter syndrome. I'm nervous that this book is going to be any good. And so therefore we seek distraction. Fatigue. We're just so busy with so many things that we don't wind up having time to even concentrate on stuff. Or uncertainty. You're not sure where something's going. These are the 5 biggest internal triggers that cause us to seek distraction. Again, the key thing to understand is distraction is just an unhealthy escape from those bad feelings. Distraction is an unhealthy escape from it. So if you're finding yourself afraid or suffering from imposter syndrome or bored with the topic, we let ourselves be distracted, not the other way around. And so for me, I was blaming all these other people on being too busy. But the reality is that wasn't what was going on. I was blaming other people. The reality is there was something else going on internally that was encouraging me to seek distraction. And so this is the interesting thing. What's going on inside you that you're nervous about? And that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about today and even throughout the course of the relationship. So what's going on inside you that is keeping you from doing what you've already set out you want to do? The big thing that Nir said, and to me, is he said, Eric, so what are you afraid of? And I was like, wow, like, that's a good question. Like, why am I not making progress? What am I afraid of? And so I stepped back and I thought about it a lot. And I realized this was it. I was working on this new book, and I was afraid that the guy that people call the book professor wouldn't write a very good book. That was it. I was super nervous. I thought that people were going to like make fun of me and say like, oh, this is crappy. How can this guy do it? And what I realized I was doing in my head is I was letting this enormity of this audience that was going to read it judge me and do me when they'd not even read it. They had no idea behind it. I was afraid of being an imposter. And so the big thing for me is I was insecure. I was just insecure because I thought everyone was going to look at me and judge me. And the interesting thing about it is we all have these fears. All of us are nervous in one way or another. We just don't address it head on. And so here's what's important about it. Number 1 is it's not about necessarily blaming other things. It's about recognizing what's going on internally so that then you can devise a plan to get over it. And that was the thing that was important here. What was happening for me was this. I found myself throughout this entire summer as I was having this happen. This is a graphic that Nir shared. What happens is these internal triggers happen. We have these things. For me, it was fear, this insecurity stuff. And it was leading me to seek these distractions, these internal triggers. And what that was doing was forcing me away from my goal. I was doing actions that took me away because I was afraid that I wasn't going to produce a very good book. Internally, I was having these running dialogues. It's not going to be very good, so you might as well do other things. Don't do the book. That was what was happening. And so I realized that that was my biggest problem. I was afraid of that one. And so I let myself be distracted. And that's the important thing to understand here. It wasn't that the other stuff was going on. It was the fear that was inside me was letting me be distracted. And that's the core. We all were going to have these doubts along the way that are going to let you distract yourself. The core thing is to recognize it and solve it. And so the more you're focused on the internal things you're nervous about, the more your editor can help you, the more that I can help you, and the more importantly, the more that you will get to what you want to go. So for me, that was a whoa moment. I was like, holy cow, that was like really crazy. And what was powerful about it was not only did I realize it was powerful for me, as soon as I started talking to it with authors that had sort of struggled, I realized they were all suffering the same thing. The authors that didn't get there, that got distracted, were too busy. Every single one of them had something going on. It wasn't they were too busy. It was that they had one of these 5 things going on. And so I think what's interesting about it is not number one, noting it, understanding it, but number 2, recognizing there's a plan. And this is why it's so important that we met Shonda tonight, is your editors are really, really helpful in this endeavor to help you succeed. So the key thing to understand here is that when you talk to someone like Nir and Cal Newport, is there a way to harness these feelings to create traction rather than distraction? And so I talked to Nir about it. It's like, how would he recommend that I did this one? And so what we talked about is this. He said there's 3 steps that authors need to harness in order to become indistractable, to get through these sort of internal triggers. Number 1, you have to write it down. You have to sort of put pen to paper and say, this is what I'm nervous about, number 1. Number 2, you have to make time for traction. You have to have time on your calendar. Otherwise, it won't happen. Number 3, you have to use this powerful thing called packs. And we're going to do our first one of them tonight. Those are the 3 things that 2 of the leading experts talk about. Write it down, make time for traction, and number 3, use packs with others to kind of get outside of yourself. So for me, I recognized my internal trigger. I was nervous about not writing a good book. I was insecure about it. That was my internal trigger. And so I did. I wrote it down. I said, listen, I am nervous that I won't write a very good book. That's what I'm nervous about. So the biggest thing that I recognized for me was I had this idea of I was trying to write a book for everyone rather than just trying to write a book for a first draft. And that was a big thing for me. I kind of let myself get nervous about the enormity of the book rather than just focusing on the steps in front of me. So that was number 1. I wrote it down. Number 2, it's about making time for traction. Now, remember, I told you, like, I kind of had all this time on the calendar, but I wasn't really disciplined about using the time for the book. And that's one of the things you're going to have to learn is how do you make sure you block off traction time? And so that's an important one. And I was busy and I was letting myself be busy, but the reality was I was distracted. I had time that I could do this one, but I let myself do other things. I would watch Netflix. I would stay up late. I would do the things that I would let myself be distracted. So what I decided to do is I talked to my wife and I said, hey, listen, for the next month or so, I'm going to basically spend the time after the kids go to bed from 9 o'clock to whenever I fall asleep to write. And that was what I did. I just literally on my calendar blocked off from 9 p.m. until midnight every night. That's all that I did. And I told my wife that's what I was going to do. So that was in my head. I said, that's going to be my time because I'm a nighttime writer. That's what I wrote. And so I said, basically, that was what I was going to do. So I made the time on the calendar. I put it down. Now, what you'll find is not every night was I writing in that way, but a lot of nights that I did. That was the important thing. I said, I'm going to go see my kids. And then after they go to bed, I'm going to basically see what I can write. Now, the third thing, and this is an important one, is once I'd done that, I recognized the insecurity. I figured out what my time was going to be. Then you have to make pacts with others. Now, that's the important thing is that a lot of this internal critic is internal. We struggle with that sort of thing. So using other people to make pacts can be really, really successful. A pact is sort of a shared commitment you make with other people. And for me, I made 2 critical pacts that helped me go from literally no progress to finishing the first draft in a very short window of time, as you'll see. So the first one was with my wife. I told my wife, listen, honey, for the next month, I'm committed to get this draft done. So I'm going to write post bedtime this month, for the entire month. It was all of September. And this is what crazy. When I told her that one, she was like, awesome, that's great. And then for the next month, every night when I would be kind of sitting in our room, I wouldn't be writing or I'd be watching TV, she would sort of ask me like, oh, are you not writing tonight? And it kind of like had this shared collaboration. So suddenly that happened. And for others of you, it may be a roommate, it may be a parent, it may be a best friend, a spouse, but this idea here of like committing to someone else to say, hey, this is how I'm going to write, how I'm going to make time for traction work. So that was the first pact that I did. Again, I made the time for myself, but then I shared it with someone else. So I committed to the time. And then if I was sort of not holding myself accountable, someone else is going to be there to sort of hold me in that regard. So that was the first pact. Now, the second pact was something that I needed to do to address my insecurity. Now, remember, I had this feeling that I was nervous because everyone's going to hate this book and they're going to, this sort of thing, this unnamed group of people. So what I did is I said, rather than worry about everyone, I'm going to focus on getting a draft out for three people that I thought would give me really helpful feedback. Shane, who's my best friend, Heather, who's a good college friend, and my brother, Mark. And when I committed to them, I said, listen, I'm going to get you a draft of something to read by the end of October. And that's all it was. So what I did with that one, rather than having this enormity of all these people, I basically just shrunk it down to 3 people. That was what it was. And what that suddenly did is I was like, these people support me. They love me. They're going to help me make this thing better. It got me out of this way of having this insecurity thing. So here's what happened, right? I had this before where I was using this internal trigger to basically take me to distraction. Now suddenly I use this fear to trigger the right things, and actually that led me to traction. And so the question that many people ask is like, well, did that work for you? Turned out it did. I added 22,000 words in 11 days, which is sort of insane, but it wasn't hard. I mean, I did it because it just made sense. I took the fear away, and rather than being too busy and having all this other stuff going on, I was able to make a ton of progress in 11 days. In fact, I got a draft to my friends that I wanted to read this thing 20 days earlier. And it wasn't because I did anything magical. It was just because I realized that I was letting myself be distracted because of fear and uncertainty, and I wasn't making time for myself. This is it. I mean, this is sort of the documents that I sent out there, and I got a bunch of feedback on it, and I've been working on it ever since. But the core thing to know behind it was it didn't change my life. I still read stories every night, but I was able to get the content done in that way. That's the key thing to know, is that for each of us to do this one, we have to recognize what we're nervous about, and we have to make time for ourselves, and we have to make these pacts. And those are the key things that'll happen. And that's why your editor will be so helpful to you. One of the things that you're going to be doing tonight is you're going to work on populating your traction plan. And your traction plan is going to help you start to identify these things. What's important to you? What are you challenged? What are you nervous about? But more importantly, give you a shared understanding with your editor. And that's one of the reasons why I think we had so many authors succeed this cohort, was because of the fact that we had this conversation. And so I think what's important for me was I admitted what I was afraid of. I set aside time and I created packs. And for me, that was able to help me succeed. And so we're going to do the same for you. And that's one of the core things behind this one. So tonight we're going to work on your traction plan. But before we do that one, I guess I thought I would pause here for a quick second and see if anyone has questions about what it is. And again, I would tell you that many people, when they start this journey, they think, oh, whatever, like I'm just going to write this book. It's going to be fine. But honestly, writing a book is one of the most challenging things that we can do, because the internal critic is a total asshole. He is. That internal critic that you have is going to tell you, like, you're not an expert, like, this isn't a good topic, all this sort of, it's not going to be a good book. The single greatest thing you can do is figure out how to address that one. And what's crazy is when authors do that one, they succeed. And which is why I think it's important to not only address it, figure out about it, but also then have your editor in your corner to help you in that regard. So questions at all on this idea of traction and distraction before we sort of dive into the workshop portion tonight? Any questions on it? So David asked a question about sort of writing time a little bit. We'll talk about this tonight a little bit of when's your style. I think the most interesting thing I tell authors about figuring out your style of writing and when you write is to lean back into some of the times when you've had intense writing and intense projects and figure out what you do. The best indicator of future performance is past performance in a lot of these cases. So if you found yourself, if you're still in school, if you find yourself someone who really embraces deadlines, you like to pull all-nighters, you're probably a nighttime writer. If you're someone who likes to get up early and write, great. You know, it's different things for different people. But I would tell you is don't try to change your habits. Try to lean into those habits. And so if you're someone who writes really well on the weekends, do that. If you're someone who writes at nighttime, do it in that kind of way. But I think the important thing is to sort of not try and do something different in that regard, in that way. And to Namda's question a little bit about like blocking people who are critical and cynical, yeah, move on from people who are not. The important thing to know is that like there's never any sort of good time. You know, people are oftentimes skeptical early on. Why should you write a book and stuff like that? I always tell authors the same thing. I will never, ever, ever let an author publish a book that's not great. I won't do it because I think it's important to know. And so I will make sure that you're going to have that figured out in that regard. That's going to be really powerful. And Jamie asked the question about like, hey, I'm still uncertain on my topic. That's totally fine. And I think one of the things I would tell you is like, just continue through the process of learning and building. And oftentimes I think kind of like having those early conversations with your editor will help you narrow that down a little bit even further. So if you don't have your topic yet, don't worry about it. I don't think it's a bad thing. The most important thing is that you are excited about the topic, and to lean into that over anything else. Because again, if you find yourself being bored with the topic or not excited about it, that is the thing that can lead you very quickly to distraction. Other questions at all? If you have other questions, let me know. But I'm going to run into the workshop stuff tonight that I think is going to be really, really powerful. So we're going to run through 2 workshops tonight that we're going to tackle. We're going to first fill out your traction plan, and then we're going to wind up doing our first round of packs together. So what we're going to do here tonight is we're going to actually create your traction plan. And I'm going to walk you through this in Quip in just a second. But the key things to understand are these are the 3 points. We want to understand our triggers, make time, and make packs. So what we've got here is this idea here of this traction workshop that I'm going to show you in just a second a little bit. The key thing to understand here in this traction plan is that you do want to really be thoughtful about making your time. And so what is the time that you want? And so, you know, we have these things called library sessions that are coming up. If you're looking for like, hey, I want to have some regular time, plug into one of these library sessions we talked about. Just send a message to Lynn, and about every other Thursday and Sunday, we've got 4 hours of time that you can plug into. So if you're looking for a way to kind of, again, have time on the calendar, if you're someone who doesn't like writing alone, you want to have other people around you, use this to help you in that regard. And again, it's very simple. Just message Lynn saying, hey, listen, can you invite me to this Thursday's library session? She'll get you plugged in. You'll show up. There's really no agenda. You're just in there with other people. You check in at the top of the hour and kind of go. So that's the important one in that regard. Just message Lynn and she can get you plugged into them. They're all in the calendar in that regard, so you can see them, but that can be a really good way to do it. Most authors, when they talk about owning their calendar, will say they spend about 2 to 4 hours a week working on their books. And again, that's outside of our weekly session. Block it off, show up for it, and be proud when you show up. Don't worry about how much you accomplish in that regard. That really is the key in these sorts of things. So as you start to map out your calendar over the coming weeks, that's a really important one, is don't beat yourself up, right? Like, oh gosh, I sat down in this library session and I only got 500 words done. I'm a terrible person. Like, no, like be nice to yourself. You showed up for 2 hours. You made progress. That's a really important one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on populating your traction plan. And again, part of the reason we're going to fill this one out is because it's going to be important when you meet with your editor, and they're going to kind of go through it with you a little bit. So what I want all of you guys to do now is, if you haven't, is open up Quip at this point and go into our sort of shared folder. So this is under templates and tools. You'll see this document right here called Author Traction Workshop. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and go into it, and each of us are going to make a copy of it in this sort of way. So the key thing to know about all these templates is don't try to edit into them. They're all locked for a reason, but it's very easy for you to make a copy of it. So what we're going to simply do here is, once you're in the document in this way, just click Document and then Copy Document. Now what it's going to do for you is it's going to ask you to sort of like edit it. So I'm going to remove copy at the end. I'm going to write my name at this one. So I'm going to basically put Eric Custer. And now it's going to move it into private for now. What's going to happen in that regard? So it's just going to move it in my private folder. And then what you're going to want to do is move that into your author materials folder. So for now, I'm just going to leave it in my private folder, and I'll move it after the session happens. But again, this is going to be my author traction. So hopefully, while you guys can, go ahead and make a copy of your author traction workshop. And remember, when you have the chance to move this into your shared folder so your editor can see it and stuff like that, great. So I'll give everyone just a couple minutes here to set up their author traction workshop, and then we're going to walk through it as you guys go. If anyone can't find it, it's in our shared folder in the templates and tools, and there's a document that said Author Traction Workshop. And when you do into it, just click, again, the button behind it is Document, and then you're going to click Copy Document. And at that point, you'll make a copy of it, rename it where it has your name, Author Traction Workshop, and you can feel free to delete this other stuff behind it once you have it. From there, you'll actually move it into your shared folder. So the simple way to do that one is just move to folder, and then you can move it in another folder right now. Right now, it's in my private folder. All right, so this is the Author Traction Workshop worksheet that we're going to do. Anyone have any issues with it? Has everyone got theirs copied? Yes? All right. So while you guys are doing it, if you don't have it yet, definitely feel free to get it set up here. And if you have problems, just let me know in the chat room. We'll get it for you. So the key thing we're going to start to do is we're going to fill it out. And so, start out by filling out a couple sentences about your book. So I'm going to just, write some ideas here. And I'm just going to make some stuff up here. But, you can take some of the stuff that you have. I'm writing a memoir about my college experience and sharing what I learned about being very involved in student government, whatever it is in that way, right? Like that's kind of the thing. Just a couple sentences in it. You've probably written some of this stuff already in your plan. And then the genre. So in this way, I'm going to call it memoir because that's what I'm planning to do here, / creative nonfiction. And then my working title is, student leader. And then the working subtitle, I don't have one, so I'm just going to put NA. So start by doing this one. This is the thing that your editor will look at in that regard. Now we're going to talk about some of the reasons what you're excited about this book for. So I want you to go through these ones and check off all the things that apply to you. So why do you want to publish this book? You're obviously setting off on this journey to do it. I want you to walk through why you want to publish it. So, I haven't landed my dream job yet, and I want to use this book to get me there. So that might be one that you want to do. Just click it. It'll cross it off. Don't worry about it. We'll know what it means. I've never done any speaking before, but I believe my book can create a positive impact on the world through speaking. That's one that maybe I want to do. I have some experience in speaking. I want to use this to take my speaking to the next level. Maybe I have one. I want to get on podcasts and talk more about this one. My goal is to level this up to be in a startup. I want to be able to do a business behind it. Or maybe I want to be a full-time writer one day. Check all the things that apply of why you're excited about this book. What do you want this book to do for you? And the more you're able to be explicit, the more you and your editor can be on the same page about why you're actually doing this book. What are the things that you want the book to do for you? Just take a quick minute and fill this one out. So in the second section kind of fits into that one. What would be some of the coolest stuff that could happen to you? Like, what would be amazing if the book helped you? Maybe it's something like, I want to do a main stage TED talk. Maybe that's your goal. Or I want to get hired as an adjunct professor. I want to work for NASA. What would be absolutely amazing if this book helped you do? What was the thing that would be like just sort of a dream scenario? What would be super duper cool to you? An interesting job that would happen, a speech you could give, someone who you might interview. What is the main thing that you think would be just the coolest thing that could happen to you because of this book? What would that be? I want to interview Oprah, right? Whatever that thing is. What is that idea? Just pick one thing that would be super cool. Again, dream big. What would be something super amazing for you in that regard? And then I want you to fill out what are some of the things that you might like to do your book, but besides a paperback. If you thought about doing an audiobook, would you love to read an audiobook? Do you want to have a hardcover? Have you thought about I'd love to have this book translated in Chinese? Just dream a little bit. What would you like to have happen? Again, part of this is we're going to be clear of what we want our goals to be. So identify some of these things that you have here. That's really what the first section is a little bit about. We want to clearly identify why you're writing it and what are some of the things that you want this book to be to help us really clearly state out what our goal is going to be. So that's the first couple sections here. From there, I want you to talk a little bit about your style. And I think this was the question that was asked to me a little bit by David. What's your style of writing? So when I've typically written bigger things, term papers, thesis, work projects, my style is, number one, I set aside time every day or multiple times a day to try writing. That's not me. I don't work on a set schedule, but usually I write in bigger sessions. 3 to 6 hours of intense writing is how I make progress. Usually several of those is how I write. That's definitely my style. I get most of my best work done right before it's due. Sometimes that means late nights or intense pushes, but I always get that done. I'm probably a little bit of that too, but I'd say mostly I'm in that one. So I'll click these two. Those are important ones. And again, this is to help you get a sense of what is your style that you're going to do to create content. Now, this is where really the magic happens. And this is the important thing about the fear. Now, you've been at your book for a couple weeks now. Since we first talked, it's been a few weeks. What are the things that makes you most nervous about this book? What are the things that you are just nervous about that you haven't talked about a lot? And these are the things we talked about with Mira Y'all. I feel uncertain about the book direction. And, as I begin to explore, I'm having doubts if it's as exciting as I originally thought. This is the idea of boredom. I'm not sure I'm in love with this topic. And if that's something you're fearful of, that's great. This is something you and your editor can really dive into. It's like, I'm just not in love with this topic direction yet. That could be one. You can click multiple of them, but the idea here is try to identify the one or two that are most important. The second one, and this is a little bit about how your style is. I feel really energized during our weekly sessions, but when I'm working on the book by myself, I get myself in my head. Typically what's happening there is the loneliness aspect. You like to be around other people. You're energized by people. So loneliness can be something you're afraid of. Like, I want other people around me to help me. And this could be something you and your editor can work on. Number 3, I feel like an imposter. And this is the big one for me. Am I really qualified to write this? And when it's finished, will it be any good? This insecurity. This was the big one for me that I really, really suffered with. Are you insecure about your ability to write this book? Number 4, I'm very, very busy, like almost to the point where it's insane. And I'm just nervous that I'm going to have sufficient time. And this is a little bit of where you are frenetic. You've got all these activities and stuff like that. You're having trouble even you're just fatigued with all the things you're doing. That could be something that some of you have. Again, it's not that I'm just too busy, but it's that you got all these activities going on, and even trying to figure out how to fit this one in could be yours. And again, that's something that you and your editor can do, or I'm just not sure I can do it. I'm not a great writer. I'm worried that I can write a whole book. This uncertainty of the project itself, I'm worried about it. Most people will select one or two of these things that you would identify. So what makes you the most nervous about writing your book? And these are the things that you're going to discuss with your editor. Now, the last part of this one is we're going to talk a little bit about your confidants. Remember I told you that one of the keys to success is having packs with other people you can talk to. So I want you to list out 3 people that you would describe as a mentor, a confidant, an advisor in your life, people that you would go to. Because part of this is we're going to use these as people that we go to for our packs. So I already shared some of mine. My wife Allison. She was one of mine for sure. My wife Allison. I listed this off. My friend Shane. The other one that I had here was my brother Mark and my best friend Heather. Those were 3 confidants that I had. And these are people that I can use to make packs with to help me along the way. These are people that you've shared your journey with or you need to. Excuse me, this way. So that's really the goal I want you to fill out. A little bit about the book, kind of where it is, why you want to publish this book, what would be some amazing outcomes from it, and what do you want the book to be? What are some of those things? Then, what is your writing style? How have you seen this before? What makes you nervous? What is the biggies that you're most nervous about? Don't click them all. I mean, obviously you can have all of them, but what are the real big ones? And then who are 3 or more people that you would describe as someone that you might build packs around? Those are the key things. Now, once you've done those, we're going to fill out the last part of it, which is our traction plan. And this is the interesting thing, that once you write these things down, it's really powerful. You make this commitment in this way. So we're going to be writing out our traction plan that we're going to work with our editor. So I want you to go through, and I love this quote because I think it's important, from John Rockefeller. I do not think that there is any other quality so essential to success as any kind of the quality of perseverance. It overcomes almost everything, even nature. What I think is important about perseverance is we have to persevere. We have to make that call, and the traction plan is going to help you do it. So start with this one. And what is your writing style? I am an episodic writer. So I'm going to remove these ones for episodic writer. And I'm going to say, sometimes I am a deadline writer. So that's the first part of this sort of traction plan here. I'm an episodic writer, but sometimes I do it. My plan is to schedule time how? Write this out. So I am going to schedule 3 to 4 hour chunks after bedtime, or let's say mornings 5 to 7 a.m. 3 times a week, or weekends on Saturday from 9 to noon, or whatever. What is your plan? How are you going to schedule time? Just be upfront with yourself. What have you found works well? How are you going to do it in those ways? Or, listen, you could also say, I'm going to need to work with my editor to attack this every week. That's an important thing. What are you most nervous about, right? I'm most nervous about sort of that I might not be able to write a good book, insecurity, right? That way. But I know that, I am, my first draft is just for a small group. That might be the way to do it. So I'm most nervous about loneliness, but I know that I can use these library sessions so I don't have to write alone that way. Or I'm most nervous about the uncertainty, the boredom part of it. I don't know my topic yet, but I do know that my editor can help me. What are those things? I'm most nervous about what? What is that nervous thing you're about? And then what are the things that you can tell yourself how we can solve that one? I know my editor can help me in this one, whatever it is. And the last one, I want you to write this out. And this is an important thing. When you write this down, it makes a difference. I want you to write down, I am an indistractable author. Write it down here. And just by writing this down, this will help you in this way. Remember, this is a process. You're going to learn these sorts of things here. But that's kind of the goals behind this one, is to help you fill this one out. And then when you meet your editor, you're going to share it with them. And you're going to work through this together. A lot of it is because they're going to then be able to tell you, hey, what's going on. They may see Carlton's editor may say, hey, Carlton, I've seen you've been sort of struggling to get writing down. Are you feeling nervous because you're not sure you can write a good book in that kind of way? You can have that conversation. That's really what's powerful about these sorts of things here, is that the more you're upfront with your editor about what makes you nervous, these things, the more likely you are to be able to succeed in it. So questions on the traction plan at all at this point? So take some time to fill it out. Again, I think, you may need some more time to add to it, but I think the biggest thing I would share with you is really be upfront about what you're nervous about. What are those sorts of things that you are there? Because once you do it, the whole book will unlock for you, because now it's not the distraction stuff. It's the real fears you have, and working to solve those things together can be really, really powerful. That's a big one right there. All right, any last questions here? We're going to run into our last part of the workshop tonight. All right, let me run through the last stuff, and then we'll get you guys into the last sort of workshop together for our author circles. So fill out your traction plan. And remember, I think a big part of this one is having something for your editor that we're going to do. So tonight for our author circle, we're going to do something really fun. we're going to help each and every one of you do your first pact. Now, remember what a pact is. A pact is a way for you to basically create a shared commitment with another person or another group of people to do something together and to hold each other accountable. So in our author circle tonight, I'm going to help you guys do your first pact. We're going to divide up into small groups of about 3 or 4 people, and each and every one of you are going to tell a little bit about you and your book. Number 1, you're going to start by telling what you're afraid of, what you're nervous about related to the book. And then number 2, I want you to tell the group a story that motivated you to write this book, because that's the first thing that I want you to write this week. I want every one of you to write the story personally that motivated you to write this book. Now, even if you're doing something on the fiction side, like you're doing something fiction or you're doing something poetry, this is what you will use probably in your author note or something like that. But I want you to tell the group a story that motivated you to do it. Remember, stories have 3 things. They have a date, they have a location, and they have dialogue. So tell something that happened growing up that sparked you to write this book, or tell something that happened to you in college, or share something about it that you motivated to write this book. Because here's what we're going to do as a pact together. What I want each and every one of you to do in your kind of quip rooms, I want you to create a shared quip pack. So what I want one of you guys to do is go in and create a new message thread where all of you are in it in the room. And so put everyone's name in here and create a message. And what you guys are going to do is you guys are going to share your story you're going to write this week. I want every single one of you to try this week to fill out your traction workshop. And then number 2, I want you to write a 500 to 1,000 word story. And I want you to commit that you all are going to write this 500 to 1,000 word story and share it with the rest of your audience, the rest of your pack group by next session. Now, what that'll do is help you hold accountable, number 1. But number 2, you've already told the story. They're excited about it, and they want to hear you, see how you've written it in that regard. So that's the big thing that we're going to do tonight in that regard. Is we're going to start to write our first story, continue doing the library sessions, continue working on populated content index. But the big stuff I want you tonight is remember there's no behind, and I want you all to kind of create your first shared pack. So any questions on how this is going to go at all? I'm going to divide you guys up into rooms. I want you to share with each other, like, what are you nervous about on your book, number 1? And what is a story that happened in your life that motivated you or excited you to write this book? And then I want one of you in the group to create a shared quip chat with all 4 or 5 of you guys together. And then I want you to all commit to each other. Over the next week, I'm going to share my first story that I wrote together. Questions on that at all? All right. So I'm going to kind of divide you guys up into rooms here now, and we'll put you guys in rooms together. And then we'll get back together in just a few minutes here and talk, kind of wrap up here. But for the next 15 minutes, go ahead and go in and share kind of where you're at on your book. And then we'll get back together. Remember, share what you're most nervous about, and then share the story that motivated you. We'll get back together here in just a few minutes and kind of wrap up the session together. So I'm going to open the rooms now, jump in, and then we'll get you guys back together in just about 10 minutes or so.